All right, and we're live. Nice dramatic entrance there, Brent. That was awesome. Welcome everyone to the Expo SDK 54 live stream. SDK 54 just came out last Tuesday. I think I got that right. So it's fresh and new and in everybody's hands, and it's got a lot of good stuff to it. We've got Beto and Brent on the line, ready to talk and show us lots of goodies in SDK 54. We'll get started in a couple minutes. We'll let folks roll in to the chats and the threads and the live streams. How's it going, guys?
Good. I'm excited to show some pretty sick demos here.
Awesome. As we're getting started,
navigating a multi-monitor setup.
Oh, geez.
Trying to figure out how to get this set up. Yeah.
Let Brent, everybody have a moment of silence. Let Brent concentrate, because monitor switching, 50 years. How many years have we had monitors and we still haven't solved this as a society, making this straightforward?
We'll get there one day.
I still do like weird copes where, like, if I take my laptop into like different places, I still always just like put my monitor on the right, because at home it's on the right and it's hard to move. And I'm just like, I'm just going to move my whole body because I don't trust the computer to make this for me.
Yeah, I have my setup similar to that. I move myself. I don't move anything else. So sometimes I'm working like this.
So yeah, let's hear in the chat who has migrated to Expo SDK 54 or just tried it out. Yeah, let us know in the chat if you've tried it out. I tried it out. I don't know, several projects. I migrated one project early. I just got the patch for native wind on another project and migrated over that I'm working on right now, and that was working great. So if you're asking about native wind 4.2.0, go grab it. You'll be good.
Nice. I've seen many comments from developers upgrading. They are having a nice experience for what I've seen. That's really nice to hear.
Cool. And Brent, we meant to ask you, I know Alan's been doing a lot of work on the SDK release, but long time you were the guy. You're certainly still busy for this release. So we were curious, how does one unwind, relax after the hustle and bustle of an SDK release?
Answer issues on GitHub, go on Discord, go on Reddit, answer support emails. Yeah.
Very relaxing. So you don't go directly to Disney World, is what you're saying?
No. Maybe play a little guitar. That can help. Yeah. No, I mean, it's often when things are out and you have gone through the cycle of 4 months of building all these features and improvements and then shipping it. It is actually kind of relaxing to go over the issues that come up and, oh yeah, here's one thing we missed in our documentation that we actually have already solved, or here's this small little detail that we don't explain particularly well. And a lot of them end up being that sort of thing. And there's certainly some other issues that come up. But yeah, just like going through and making sure that everything's really smooth is kind of in its own way a little bit relaxing and therapeutic. It has its days, as you guys know. But overall,
as someone who's often answering the questions, it is like one of the best feelings when someone has a question like that and you can jump in right away, knowing that someone has thought about this, experienced, or we looked at it and be like, here's a really good solution. Ideally, maybe the next person finds it in the docs because we highlighted a little bit better based on the one person who didn't find it. Yeah. But being able to, help someone out in that way is just a really good feeling.
Yeah, and being able to share all the stuff that we've worked on is really fun. And I mean, using this stuff as well is great. Like putting this demo together which I'll show people later, was fun to play with all the stuff that we built and just see it and go, oh wow, yeah, this is really happy with how this release went, and that gives you a little bit of sense of like tying putting a bow on it and kind of wrapping things up on the release. So yeah,
nice, Cool. We'll get officially started here. We've had folks rolling in the chat. We've got some folks who have upgraded to SDK 54. Let us know. Let us know how your upgrade is going in the chat, and also ask us any questions. We'll be stopping at many points throughout to answer your questions. So if you have a question about SDK 54, Expo, whatever's on your mind. I mean, I guess within a certain set of topics that are relevant to the show, but yeah, pop them in the chat and we will answer them. So everyone, welcome to the SDK 54 live stream, the Expo live stream. So we're here to talk, of course, about SDK 54. What's new? What's cool in it? Before we're gonna have a couple demos here of some key features, but yeah, I guess going around the room, like, how would you guys summarize this release? Like, what's the big headlines?
I can start. Big headlines: precompiled React Native, Expo UI, and Liquid Glass. What else?
Yeah, those are pretty good. I think there's a lot of other things that it's interesting going through the release notes, and then you see all the stuff that we've built over this time, and there are things that sometimes they're projects that we built during part of the cycle. Sometimes they're projects that we've been working on for for multiple SDK cycles. There's, for example, taking Expo file system next and promoting that to the latest. Like, that was a long time in the making of like really deliberately sitting down and thinking about how we want this next version of the file system API to look like, what issues we've had with the other one, where we want to go with that, and being kind of deliberate about rolling this out during a kind of preview window for a couple SDKs, getting more people using it, gathering feedback, and getting that out. Things like that are kind of, I think they fly under the radar a bit because you see maybe read file system and it's such a small utility thing, but I think is really good. And even things like the feature that Beto mentioned about precompiled React Native for iOS, like that was something that that Christian on our team has been working on since I think January, off and on, among other things, with Ricardo from Meta, and like that project was spanned all these releases. So it's really, I think, a nice thing to get out. And another aspect of it that we've mentioned in a couple of places is it's kind of like a stepping stone to moving towards Swift Package Manager and React Native. So we're looking forward to getting that in place. But additionally, it's also a stepping stone towards us going back to precompiling Expo modules on iOS. We do this to some extent on Android already. And we used to precompile Expo modules on iOS and ran into some blockers that now we've, I think, probably solved for by doing this work on iOS. So I think for me, there's also some of this stuff where like maybe you can't use this stuff today, but like if you read between the lines, the sort of features that are unlocked by some of the changes that we've made in this release are also kind of like quiet headline features for me, and exciting that we can actually go in those directions now.
Nice. Yeah, when I say this out loud, maybe it feels kind of silly because like every SDK release involves like UX and DX, user experience and developer experience. But I've been thinking of this release as like the UX and DX release, because you have these like really front and center things that are about like the user experience, like the iOS 26 UI improvements around Liquid Glass and a bunch of native UI features, Expo UI going into beta. Yeah, even like the Android 16 default edge-to-edge support, things like that, things that are like really front and center for users just experiencing like pretty much every app. But then on the other side of it, you have these like developer experience things that are like, under the surface that you'll notice just when you start using it. Like, oh, my builds are much faster because of precompiled binaries, or I have like much better stack traces now on the console when there's an error, or promises now throw exceptions, things like that. So a bunch of these little things that you'll notice as you're developing, or the new development, dev build client, which has been like a total rewrite, which looks really good now.
I think another big one on that side is the work that Phil and Cedric on our DevTools team did around just like creating more sanity around how NPM packages are handled by React Native, by auto linking, and moving us to a state where now monorepos can just work out of the box. So there's a lot more like this. This is, again, one of those things that Cedric has been working on for years at this point, upstreaming changes into React Native to better handle different package managers and their own idiosyncrasies. And now most recently with a lot of changes to autolinking to ensure that there's consistency between how autolinking resolves modules and how package managers and Metro package managers install them and how Metro resolves them. So there's some really, really valuable work there where you probably most people won't notice, but like if it wasn't there, then this next generation of people who start to use React Native and try to use a monorepo or try to run into some weird quirks with dependencies that they don't understand. Like the hope is that a lot of these will just be resolved by fixing this systematically. So maybe you can delete some workarounds in your app if you're using this sort of stuff today. So.
And
awesome.
one more headline that I wanted to mention, Expo Router version 6, we almost forgot. Amazing job by the team as well, Jacob and Evan. We can now enjoy of the new Liquid Glass tabs on iOS and of course the native tabs on Android from the material design. And also preview links and many great stuff also from here, but he integrated modals on web that look amazing. So really excited for that as well.
Yeah.
All right, this is stretching on a bit long, Keith, but I got to mention another one here. Is also enabling React compiler by default. Like, I think it's easy to forget that even going back a year or two, people were, when are we going to get this? When like there's all this years long kind of thing, and like you can turn this on in your app, and it's just going to improve your rendering performance. Like period, right? It's just going to do memoization for you in places where you haven't done that yourself yet, and leave whatever you're doing already alone. And it just does that in a way that's like, this is no effort for you. As long as you're following the rules of React, you're not going to run into any issues. And it's it's a pretty nice thing to enable. And we haven't really heard of anyone running into significant issues there with React compiler yet. In previous release, there were maybe a few quirks, but feeling pretty good about it right now. So that's something people should definitely not take for granted here. It's a big change.
It's pretty awesome.
Great job
just to be like, okay, upgraded, and now I have like way better, like all these like weird edge cases and performance. I don't really have to worry about them in the same way, but I also don't have to worry about like, hey, is this thing going to work or not? This is like a really solid thing.
Yeah, thinking about re-rendering in React is like not the most fun thing to do necessarily. So this helps a lot with that. And so big shout out to the React team for all the work that they did on that, because that was really ambitious project that I think is going to work out quite well.
Yeah. Now we can ask our AI to just don't use memo or memo. Keep it simple.
They'll probably use memo away from me. I feel so comfortable. Wait, why do I need to write that? Well, speaking of a good segue there from liquid glass tabs and things like that. And by the way, for folks who are looking forward to hearing more about Expo Router v6 features, we'll touch on a few of them, but we're going to have an Expo Router v6 live stream next week this time. So stay tuned for that. We'll hear even more. The SDK release, so nice. We live streamed about it twice. With that, let's bring on Beto. Beto is going to demo for us the iOS 26 new features, Liquid Glass. So,
yep,
here we go. And by the way, as he's setting up here, feel free to ask us any questions. One of my favorite things is to interrupt Beto and Brent while they're cooking. So ask some good questions, and I will butt in with them gladly.
So this is the demo. I've been building this application using the new Expo UI beta for iOS. And I wanted to highlight in this demo how it looks now with the new liquid glass design on the right and on the left in older iOS versions. I have here this iPhone using iOS 18. Fully native stuff. This is how it looks. I'm not using all the components that we have at the moment on Expo UI for iOS, but this is kind of like what you can achieve utilizing like a form, a switch, a button, and combining all these primitives in your application. So let me show you. One thing that I really like is that it's fully compatible with dark mode, so you don't have to worry about use theme a lot or handling the text in dark mode, worrying about everything. You don't have to worry when you're using Expo UI. And then you get awesome native features. For example, on iOS 18, when you open a bottom sheet, you notice that it's native because all the buttons are disabled, right? You see the open, now it's gray. And if
Ooh.
I scroll a little bit, all these buttons that I have here are automatically disabled. That's how you know everything is fully native, and it looks really nice. Now they remove it on iOS 26. No, I don't know why. it's still blue, but yeah, that's how it looks. Of course, now we have the new bottom tabs using the liquid glass. You can see behind it. Let me see if I can get this button behind it. Look at that. So that's the liquid glass effect. And in older versions, I'm just providing a background color. Okay. You can have these kind of expandables with pickers, combining all these primitives to form a more complex UI, like this one right here. Fully native using liquid glass. And in older versions, you will see the old stuff. This is how it looks. Now, one of my favorites, the context menu. You can even nest context menus. And that's how it looks on different iOS versions. Now, in some cases, when you are just compiling your application for the first time on iOS 26, you might encounter some issues or differences between the new stuff and the old stuff. So for that, Nishan created from the team Expo Glass Effect, which is a new package that you can now use to make some pretty cool validations and also use the glass effect from Apple in iOS 26. So let me show you a quick code demo here. The way you can use this package is just by installing it, and then you can import things like is liquid glass available, which is a variable that will let you know if the device is running iOS 26 or not. And then based on that, you can achieve different things, right? So for example, the glass buttons, they won't work on older versions. So for example, I'm using here this prominent new effect. It's a liquid glass button. And on the left, as you notice, it's just white. It's defaulting to the default button. So you have to be careful in those cases. For example, if I switch to light mode, you can see that now I lost my button because it's white. So in this case, let's say, for example, that I don't want to render these buttons on older versions. So you can just go to the code. This is Expo UI, and you can just have a validation like this and wrap this in here. Well, I can wrap both. Well, I can duplicate this just for the sake of this demo and hit save. And then now you notice that in older versions, you won't be displaying those buttons, right? That's how you can validate. I did that as well for the header background in older versions. So you might want to do that as well and keep it transparent on the new iOS 26 so that you get that blur effect at the top. I'm not sure if it's easy to see there, but yeah, that's iOS 26 only. And then you can still use the material blur on older versions like that. I think it's easier to see in dark mode. Yeah.
Nice.
And yeah, finally, I'm using Expo Router version 6 just to add the cherry on top with the new liquid glass tabs. And also a new cool feature on Expo Router version 6, maybe I can just quickly show you, is that you can pass a role search to the tab, and that will group the tab apart. I didn't implement the search because I didn't have time, but that's how it looks. So you've seen this maybe in the new GitHub application and Apple Music. Really nice UI, I think. Yeah, looks really nice. Fully compatible, and this is how it looks on older versions, like this. And just to show you, I also created this custom card just using Expo UI to track how I'm feeling.
Yeah, send us straight up to celebrating. We're there.
Yep. And thanks to the community, by the way, someone contributed Swift charts. So you can now have these really cool charts.
Wow. That's really cool.
Yep. This is how it looks. Let's see. We have Pi, which is my favorite. And the cool thing is that when you change the data, you have that native transition. It looks really cool. And yeah, you can use it today in Expo UI.
Y'all are going to make me switch to iPhone. That looks really good.
Yeah, you should.
Speaking of that, we did have a quick question that I think probably pretty straightforward to answer from RoboMonster, that asking about the native tabs in the Android version, because we also support, this is more of an Expo router thing, but there is also the option to use the native Android tabs.
Yep. This works as well on Android. I didn't compile it right now for Android, but you will get the default material tabs on Android. So it's not going to be liquid glass. And I've seen many developers asking about liquid glass on Android, and that's just an iOS only feature. But for Android, we have native fallbacks using the material tabs.
But of course, since it'll have like that material design 3 flourishes that are typical in that sort of tab bar, it'll look at home on its platform. Because I mean, as Android users, maybe we'd like liquid glass, but we'd have to admit, if you just stuck some random liquid glass in our app, we'd be like, oh, that looks like an iPhone.
Yeah, true.
Cool. I think, we've seen this before, but I think it bears, just as you've been flipping back to your code, like it bears mentioning just how expressive and brief in a good way, like the Expo UI code is, being able to drop, okay, here's a labeled content, here is a button with this variant of button. I don't see any pixel values being stuck in the styles over there. It's kind of just flowing together. So when you have code that is expressive in that way, it's I think a lot more tolerant to then do those branches that you need to do, like, should I enable the liquid glass here or not enable it based on the iOS version, or not even the iOS version. We just have the flag that just tells you if it's available or not. So it feels much easier to digest needing to have branching logic like that when we don't have to think about, well, how do I completely restyle this button?
Yep, exactly. So for example, in the layout of the home screen, I'm using a different tint color. Oh, that's for the theme. But for example, here for the blur effect, I only want to apply this to older versions. So you can just have this simple validation and apply, for example, this based on the theme to older versions, and then to the new one, just leave it undefined. And that's what I like about staying close to the native primitives, is that the code remains simple and it actually starts growing as you want to do very different things. And in my opinion, just trying to keep it as native as possible will keep the code clean and just with the native feel. For example, here, it's very simple, just a couple of settings. And if I was just supporting liquid glass, I could remove this and maybe remove this as well. But yeah, I also wanted to mention here in the profile section, all these components, we can import them just directly from Expo UI. And this actually saves tons of time. If you need like a picker, daytime picker, a context menu, you usually have to go and search for that library somewhere in NPM, hope that is well maintained, hope that is MIT licensed, and then install it, make sure that it's well maintained. So the cool thing about Expo UI is that you can just reach out for any native primitive that you need. It doesn't really need to be a form, right? Like in this case, let's say that you just want this context menu somewhere in your app. You can just directly import it and start using it with one dependency, including a daytime picker, like here. Everything is coming from Expo UI. So nice. You save a lot of time. Yeah. Switch everything.
It's always so hard to make a decent calendar component that looks like that on your own. Like,
yeah, and you can change any variables. Like you can have the wheel, for example, or even let the user select the compact. That's how it looks with the liquid class effect. Works exactly the same way. And we have, I think, an equivalent using Jetpack Compose. But of course, yeah, for the next release, I'm excited to bring Jetpack Compose equivalent as well.
And that's a good segue to a question. We have a question from Yash about the iOS focus in this SDK, and you guys can probably elaborate more on this. But we this particular SDK lined up with a very important UI change for iOS. That the iOS 26 UI was changing significantly compared to 25. So I think it was natural that there was some focus on making sure that you had the ability when you upgrade to opt in or turn on the latest native UI features because they change so dramatically. Because you don't want to, like, as soon as possible, if you want to ship to support that, you want to be able to support liquid class. So there's definitely a focus on working with iOS 26 in this release, but there is Jetpack Compose components that can be exported from Expo UI, and I believe we'll be continuing to expand that.
Yep, the goal here is to bring iOS to a stable beta version and make it as good as possible. Of course, now with the new liquid class effect, we want to enable developers to just start adopting this new style, and Expo UI is a good way to start adopting it. And you can always fall back at the moment if you really want to do it. You can use any Expo UI component and create a fallback for Android and web. So for example, here, I created this normal view with the extension .ios.tsx. And here I can import whatever I need from Swift UI, Expo UI. Okay, so I created my custom view with the slider. Everything is nice. I'm using VStack, CStack. And then if you just render this directly, the app will break on Android and web. But if you create the .ios extension and then create the same component with just TSX extension, you can implement a fallback. Like right now, I'm just using a text, a view, and this is going to be rendered in other platforms. So let me just quickly show you where I'm using this in my screen. I can just search for this. Here, I'm importing it as you normally import stuff, and this will render the iOS version for iOS, and Android and web will be the other fallback, and it will work. So you can keep your current UI and start incrementally adopt Expo UI where you need it or where you want it.
Nice. And I think too, with like when we talk, this isn't Expo UI isn't just like a component library or like, okay, here's some new things to import, but this is illustrating like a new approach to developing apps, in my opinion, where we went from usually we were making like one view that was kind of safe for all platforms. And now we have tools where with less code or less customization, we can break out into a native, a view for a specific platform that embraces what's distinct about that native platform. So you might start off, if you're migrating an existing app, you might start off, okay, I have a view that I rendered about the same thing on every platform. Okay, there's a bunch of options now in Expo UI for Swift UI components. Let's break out into an iOS specific version. And in the future, you might break that out into an Android version. And in the future after that, you might just completely rewrite the web version to use, I don't know, ShadCN or something like that. So I think we're getting to a point in the future where it might actually be easier to get exactly what you want writing 3 different files than it is in one, because you have to think about a lot less about the layout of the individual components or how you specifically style them.
Yeah, and the goal here is to use the native primitives, right? Make your application as native as possible with a really good feel, like context menus, speakers, sliders, all that is native for each platform, and users notice that. But worst case scenario, if you really want to share the same components, you can always use the React Native version. Expo UI, is totally optional, but of course comes with great benefits and great user experience.
As the resident Android user on the chat, I give everyone permission to fork the iOS view first. It's totally okay. I understand.
There we go.
One more quick question before we move on to Brent's got some cool stuff to show us around EAS update and some other things. But a question about native tabs on iOS versions prior to 26. Does it render, obviously you don't get the liquid glass native tabs, but does the native tabs component work for previous versions?
This is the iOS 18 and older. So this is what you can expect on the left. Not sure if you can see it there. I think the comment is covering it.
Yeah. Dan, if you could hide the comment.
Yeah, there we go. So this is how it looks. And this is what you can expect as well on Android, similar, but using the native Android tabs.
Yeah. So there's always a native tab component pre-iOS 26. It just, the default native tab component looks different pre-Liquid Glass. So when you import native tabs, you're going to get native tabs for whatever version of the operating system you're running.
Yep, these are the native tabs for iOS 18. And you get as well the default behavior. For example, if you press on the tab, it will do scroll up by default. If you are on a different screen, it will do pop to root by default. So yeah, everything native. And then on the top, you can see that I'm using as well native primitives with the materials of iOS. And on the right, it's just the blur effect with iOS 26. And I showed the code here. Maybe you missed that. But this is how it looks. This is my index. And by the way, this is open source. It's on my GitHub. Maybe we can put the link here. I'll share it in a moment in the chat. But this is how it looks. It's just regular stuff. And this will work on 26 and older versions, and on Android as well. And this is actually a nested stack inside the tabs. You notice that these two are nested stacks, but my tabs are here. For my tabs, I'm just saying that the folder home will be the entry point. And then here, I'm creating a new stack. And I have here as well the sheet and the index screen. So keeping this super simple. And because this is a stack, that's how we can navigate to this sheet, bottom sheet. This is how it looks on iOS 18 and 26.
Cool. All right. Thank you very much. That was an awesome demo showing us all the Liquid Glass goodies, giving us a taste that we'll see more on the Expo Router live stream next week too. So yeah, now we'll move on to Brent's got some cool features related to EAS updates and the Expo Updates package to show off here.
Yeah, I do. Let's share my screen here.
And one more reminder, if you have questions in the chat, we have some good questions coming in. We'll try to get as many as we can. So keep them coming.
Yeah, I guess I'm going to have to take a short break from answering questions in chat to demo some of this stuff. Yeah, so we've made some really nice improvements to Expo Updates and EAS Update in this cycle that I think are just like, maybe will, similar to some of the other stuff I mentioned earlier, like fly under the radar for a lot of people because, I mean, admittedly, our release notes are quite long and dense, so it's easy to skip over some stuff that doesn't maybe have a screenshot or a video attached and include words like Liquid Glass and iOS 26 and Swift UI and faster builds and stuff like that. So, but I do think that these features are actually really, really compelling and stuff that probably a lot of people on this call will use. So now that I've teased that, let's talk about something different first, really quickly. I'm going to talk about just like what we've set up here. So it might look familiar to you, like similar to what Beto was just demonstrating. Right, we just have this really simple index screen, which is using some Swift UI components, because otherwise making this sort of UI is a real pain and it just never looks quite right. I just wanted to demo this little feature that's kind of buried in our release notes, where we've added an implementation of local storage. So you can import Expo SQLite local storage install, and then just use local storage. So if you deploy to the web as well, this will work with the same API on the web. It doesn't add anything to your bundle size. In that case, it just uses the web local storage implementation. So I'm using that to persist this state. So it's literally just like this state where I synchronously get the current value of the is live stream mode variable that we've saved, well, rather key that we've saved to local storage. And then whenever we set that state, we're just going to update that value. So if I reopen this, right, we'll see, okay, that's persisted off. And if I do that and reopen it, nothing fancy. This thing was always possible before. I think it's just a nice little like quality of life thing, especially if you're used to using local storage, and just having synchronous access to it as well is also really nice. Like there's no real barrier here to you just adding some simple persistence of different state values using this API. So just wanted to call that out as a nice little feature.
I read the release notes so many times, and today I learned about that feature. So read those notes close, guys. There's a lot of good stuff in there.
It's really nice that you don't have to call in a use effect to get the value, right? It just,
right, because it's synchronous.
Right there. Yeah. Pretty cool.
Yeah. Right. So that's great. And React compiler deals with what we need here to make everything work well. And so we just have some simple stuff here. I just wanted to like add some nice little set just to give you a quick walkthrough of what we have. This is just using the Expo Glass Effect library and the Glass Effect container to have some simple effects here. We could potentially change this stuff inside of an update in a moment. I thought it was kind of fun to see how glass views stack on top of each other. Maybe not very nicely. You be the judge of that, I guess. If you keep going, it just becomes totally opaque. Which I guess question for the audience, does physical glass behave that way? I don't know. Ooh. I don't know much about glass, got to be honest with you. I usually deal with one pane of glass at a time. So if anyone has a bunch of panes of glass laying around and they want to stack 20 of them and see if it becomes opaque, maybe slightly tinted. I think it might be slightly tinted glass in this case.
But it's a good opportunity.
My guess is probably
glass.
Yeah. Oh no. Yeah. Okay. So, all right. So enough beating around the bush here. So we have this simple demo. Then we go to the update screen here to give you some context of what we have here. Basically, just some simple updates configuration, right? You could see our runtime version is just set to 1.0.0. I have all of this stuff just configured from running ES update configure, except I also added request headers here. So this is if you want to do a release build locally and test out how your app will behave in release with respect to updates, you can just add the Expo channel name request header here, which also serves well for our demonstration of what we're going to do. So a common thing that people like to do in their release apps is to have like a different channel of updates that go to a certain subset of users. So one way of doing that is like you could think about rollouts, right? Where maybe some percentage of your users get a version of your app, and then you increment that percentage as the update, as you get feedback on the status of the update, whether there are crashes, whether it's working well, etc. But another kind of segmenting of users is people often want something where their internal users or like their team or some early testers can opt into saying like, yeah, I want to be on the beta channel. I want to be on the like next channel or something like that. So you have an app that's live, but you're pulling updates from another channel than most people. So you have a small group of people who have opted in through one mechanism or another to say, I want to receive slightly different updates and like test things out earlier. So we've added a feature to make this really easy to do. I could go into detail if people are curious about why this didn't exist before and some of the complexities that arise around a security angle. But we wanted to make sure we did it properly. So we feel good about the way that this works. And so you can see I have this channel main. I can choose. I've just specified here on the updates route, like a few channels, main, live stream, secret, whatever that I can switch between. So I switched it here to live stream. I've set that. If I check for updates, okay, you might have seen as well that there was some download progress. Another small thing we added, which probably should have had before, but it's there now, so you can monitor the progress of downloading updates. So we check for the update. We have an update, and then we're going to reload the app to apply the update. So this will be very quick, but you can see there's a spinner that we saw there. That is another new feature. Sorry, I just like kind of attacking you with new features. But there's this new option called reload screen options, where when you call reload async to apply an update after you've downloaded it, you can specify the screen that is in between, like when you're tearing down your current version of the app and setting up your new version of the app. What do we show there? And to give you some way to specify what that should look like, so it's not just like a blank screen. We've added this API that allows you to, honestly, probably most people, just like a simple spinner is fine, maybe with like a fade effect and a background color that matches your app. You can change that depending on whether you're using like, whether the app is themed to dark mode or not, and provide the appropriate UI. In some cases, you might want to have something more like, let's say your splash screen. So, I mean, you can actually, just to verify the update applied, see we're on update demo live stream. And we could switch back to the main branch and reload with an image. And there we go. It looks like the splash screen sort of again. Well, slightly different splash screen. And the way that works is we just specified an image that we want in the resize mode and made it fade and added a background color. So it just gives you a lot of ability to customize that experience. So we think that this feature is like pretty powerful. There's a lot of things that you can do by overriding a channel and having control of that on the user side and the client side. And yeah, so I think we're probably going to see a lot of people adopting this to roll out testing of like kind of pre-update testing for employees or internal testers using a production version of your app. Because honestly, like the best way to test something is for someone to see how it actually works in as close to a production environment as possible. And if you can get some segment of your users who are willing to maybe deal with issues that might arise, like your employees who are paid to do that, then that's great, because they can field those issues for you, and they'll never reach your customers who might not be so pleased if their app crashes and or otherwise has some other unpleasant experience. Yeah, I mentioned download progress just to show you that we have this. Here we go. Just in our useUpdates hook, there's this download progress state that is exposed. So I'll just pull that off of there, do what you like with it, and yeah, it'll allow you to see. I don't know how we're doing in terms of how well you can see the updates in the UI here over this live stream, but maybe you saw some percentage count there.
I at least saw an image flash one time, but be earlier.
It is so fast. Can you add like an await so that we can see the loading?
Make your updates bigger, Brent.
Yeah, I mean,
you need to put in Lodash in there and
with
vector icons.
A large image or something like that. But yeah, I'll save everyone needing to wait for builds and publishing an update and such. But I mean, I can demonstrate, like here. Actually, we have this channel where I don't believe I've published anything to this one yet. So no channel name secret in the app with this ID. So all right, that's fine. We can go over here in our index. Like what I did for the last one was just to add some to the layout, actually, to this title, and we'll say super secret version or whatever. Right now, if I do ES update, and we'll do channel secret, then this will publish an update to that channel. we're getting a question, nothing for Android. All of this applies to Android. This all works the same on Android. The reason why I'm demonstrating iOS here is because iOS 26 was literally released on Monday, right? If Android, whatever was released on Monday, we would be showing you Android. So this all works on Android, to be totally clear. This is the exact same behavior. So if I check for updates now, okay, there we go. I've got an update on the secret channel, and I'll reload with the image, and now we have the super secret version. So there you go. Yeah, any questions, comments, concerns?
Awesome. I really appreciate the channel switching. We have a surprising number of conversations as we talk about updates and deployments. About the part before that, like we've had ways to share updates with users, say through like scanning a QR code with a development build, but there is this like psychological aspect of how do you get folks on in your like organization, like say like people outside your development team to test. And one possible way is like building your own like very straightforward UI that they just can't miss it. Like if they have installed the test version of the app once, they will have a way to test the new feature and they have no excuse. So the channel surfing gives you this really great opportunity. You can put whatever branches you want in there. You can populate them, via your app's pre-production API, for instance, and you can keep adding channels as new features come out. So really looking forward to seeing how folks interact with that to kind of bridge that psychological gap between here's something, it's pretty easy to test, but how do you get people, to the to the stream to drink?
Yeah.
We did have a question kind of going back to the storage, the local storage capability with, and yeah, just kind of an explanation. Now we have, of course, we've had local storage, async storage for a long time, secure store, but we have more options for local storage coming out of Expo SQLite itself. So maybe a succinct comparison of these different methods for storing local data.
They're all alternative ways of using SQLite, which, surprise, basically almost everything is that you use for client-side storage, right? So, yeah, it's some. I mean, ultimately, there's async storage. We have like an API compatible version of async storage as part of Expo SQLite because some libraries were built to target that interface, right? So we want it so that, hey, if you want to clean up your dependencies a little bit and maybe consolidate to using Expo SQLite, then you can just import the async storage implementation from Expo SQLite and then provide that to whatever library is looking for the async storage interface. If you're familiar with duck typing, that's kind of the idea here. And so, yeah, all these adapters will just work. And as for like the local storage version of this, I mean, it's just something that exists across the web. Like if you're starting a new project and you intend to target iOS, Android, and web, like don't use async storage. Why would you use async storage, right? Local storage exists and is on the web. And it's a pretty thin wrapper around Expo SQLite in our case. Oh, oops, I need to close this emulator here to demonstrate this. Were there other ones that were mentioned?
There was, I mean, speaking of builds, there was a question related to like seeing an increase in, I assume, the Android build size, just because I've seen that increase too. As I understand it, there is like, you can avoid this currently if you stick with Reanimated 3 for now, but there is like an issue that the Reanimated team is looking into about the build size related to that.
Yeah, and that's the thing about these upgrades is, you know, there's a whole ecosystem of tools that are powering everyone's app, and there's a lot of things going on in all of those, and we update things where we can. In some cases, there are like improvements that end up causing some side effects like larger app size, and teams working on those follow up on those and try and fix those as soon as they can. And so there's often in an ecosystem where things are evolving and improving a lot, you might see in some cases 2 steps forward and one step back. And I think like this move to separate React Native worklets into another library is great from a lot of perspectives, and maybe from now the perspective of developers working on it. The challenge is, okay, how do we make this so that this isn't going to add any sort of extra overhead to people's projects? And so like you said, Keith, you could opt into reanimated v3 if you like, in order to combat that. But I would keep an eye on the worklets and reanimated issues, and we can update people as well. And I mean, this is stuff that the team of Software Mansion is fantastic. I'm sure they'll be all over it and have a solution pretty quickly. But make sure to keep an eye on that if that's an issue for you. Precompiled Android builds when? That happened like 5 years ago. So this has been happening on Android for a long time. React Native for Android, you have to explicitly opt into building from source. And we actually have some documentation on how to do this. Let me open up our docs here. If I can get it over. All right, so in Expo build properties, if you would like to switch to building from source, let me increase the font size so you can all read this. So under plugin config type Android, build React Native from source, set it to true. Default is false. Similarly for iOS, our default is true, is false, unless you're using XCFrameworks, then we detect that. And given that there's currently an issue with that particular type of build and frameworks, but that's something we'll improve in the future. That said, on the Android side, there's more work that we can do in terms of pre-building Expo modules. We're doing that to some extent, but we hope in the next cycle to make a bunch of progress on pre-building Expo modules on both iOS and Android as much as possible, in order to just basically cut that out of your build time entirely. It'd be a very small amount of overhead for builds. So I can't promise that. To answer EZC's question, what can we expect? We can't promise that. It is a significant project, but we are definitely working on it, and we hope that we'll be able to ship that sometime in the next couple of releases. Which the goal for us is we want to cut the build time down to as little as possible. Like, we want you to be able to just run a clean build and not have React Native or Expo add almost any overhead. It should feel like you're creating a new project with Swift UI and Xcode, and you hit run and it takes 10 seconds or a few seconds or whatever, depending on your machine. Like, that should be the same experience in React Native, and that's what we're kind of working towards. So you'll see it going in that direction.
Cool. We had a couple questions about new stuff in Expo Maps, and I believe there were a few new features in Expo Maps. Cloud, JSON, like point of interest stuff, and some styling features for Google Maps.
Yeah, so there's new stuff in Expo Maps. I think the main thing about Expo Maps that is why we are still calling it alpha is that for context on Expo Maps, it's built on top of the default Maps implementation for each platform. So it supports Apple Maps on iOS, Google Maps on Android. We don't intend to support Google Maps on iOS. Someone else can build that, maintain that library, and there's React Native Maps that does that. And another thing about it is we build on top of the Swift UI and Jetpack Compose implementations. So this is great because we're using the most modern version of it. However, it's also not great because these are still evolving on their own. And in particular, the Apple Maps implementation for Swift UI has a lot of limitations. And one of those major limitations for us is that in order for people to be able to realistically use it in any sort of sensible way, we would require people to specify a minimum target iOS version of 17, which is a very high minimum, I think, for the average app. And so this is a challenge for a lot of people. They might not want to do that. if that's a constraint that is acceptable for your app and the API that currently exists does what you want, then like by all means use it. And we're absolutely working on it and maintaining it. And once we get to the point where we feel like we can recommend this because most people can use it in their apps, then it's something that we will at that time take out of alpha or move it to a beta state. It's just, yeah, building on top of this sort of foundation that is itself evolving doesn't allow us to make promises about what it will look like and the kind of version constraint as well.
Cool. Now I know we just got SDK 54 out and it's still early planning for SDK 55, but of course, once you show people SDK 54, we get questions about 55. Anything top of mind as that we could share that as we start looking into that?
Yeah, what I mentioned before about pre-building Expo modules. I mean, and someone else mentioned in the chat earlier, they use useFrameworks, so they can't currently use pre-built React Native for iOS. So we definitely want to resolve that, make sure that that is something that everybody can use all the time. And then we want to pre-build to the extent possible in this next cycle, Expo modules for iOS and Android, and give guidance for people who are building their own Expo modules, which you totally should be doing. If you're not, it's like really an approachable API, super like great tutorials with Beto, who you're probably already familiar with, but if not, you know from this call you would have seen how good he is at explaining things and walking through things. There's a good video that walks you through creating a native module. But yeah, to give people a way as well in their own libraries to ship precompiled artifacts so that that the whole ecosystem improves and gets faster. I think another thing that's really important is so Expo supports brownfield use cases quite well at the moment, but I think there's still a lot of room for improvement, and I think that just goes for the whole ecosystem. I think most people building apps where they're integrating React Native with or without Expo into an existing native app with a bunch of other libraries and a bunch of code built up over years and years, or even as a small part in like an otherwise new app that is kind of like maybe like Swift UI at the root for whatever reason, you know, like hard to say what motivations people might have, but I think they're all like, I'm sure, legitimate use cases for all sorts of things. So we want to make sure that we have really good support for everything that people want to do and everywhere that they want to use Expo and React Native in their apps. And so Gabriel on our team improved some documentation around this recently, did some changes to tooling to make it a little bit easier to use. He has a blog post coming soon about this, but you can also check out existing native app. So we have using useUpdate. We have this overview. This getting started guide will walk you through step by step how to add React Native to a native app and Expo. And so I think we're just going to keep pushing on that and getting that to a really good state. Aside from that, I mean, there's mentions in the chat about like Jetpack Compose. Of course, keep pushing on like the Android side of our Expo UI package. I've mentioned this to a few people who had questions about like what the vision is. And basically our approach here is we want to make sure you have everything you need on each platform to build this like a fully native experience using whatever tools you would like to use on the platform. And so giving you access to the most modern approaches for building UIs on iOS and Android is I think the first milestone for us with Expo UI. Following up from that, I think there's an interesting project where we could layer on top for if you want to build something that works great on each platform, but you don't want to have to think about each platform all the time. To maybe have a library that sits on top that kind of tries to normalize some of the aspects of it to an extent, and maybe limits your customizability in order to give you things that just work well across platform. So you can look at how, for example, UI components in React Native are currently implemented in that way. And so like think of like a slider, for example, or like a picker, those sorts of things that tend to be things that exist for iOS, Android, web, whatever other platform. And we're kind of starting from the approach of like, we want you to be able to do everything that you want to do with that component on that platform. And then if you want a layer that gives you less control over that, but gives you the kind of experience you have today with these sorts of components, but built on top of like the more modern version of these components, then that will be a good layer to use as well. And probably not for the next release, but ultimately we want to get to a state where like when you initialize an Expo app, you just have everything that you need to build like a standard app. I mean, you'll have to, obviously not everyone is going to need like a camera component in their app or a map component, but I think there's going to be a lot of stuff in Expo UI that maybe at least half of it will probably be used by most apps. And so this should just be there out of the box for you, right? You should just create a project, have all of these components readily available for you, and just kind of get going from there. Yeah, we want to kind of work towards resolving this issue in the ecosystem where every project has to have 15 libraries installed that just provides these sort of like basic platform capabilities of a switch, slider, whatever, the maybe even map to some extent, if that's something that ends up being common enough. I mean, there's things like the bottom sheet. I mean, we could just even go to like the Expo UI docs here and see what I'm referring to. Like all of these things, right? They're like potentially all separate libraries that you would have to install in the current world. And these are just the tip of the iceberg for what's available. And we want these to just be available in every app right away. And consistently documented, consistent API conventions, giving you like everything that you want to build native experiences in a way that just exists out of the box and requires like the least amount of dependency juggling on your end. So that's kind of not really SDK 55, but like moving in that direction in SDK 55.
Awesome. Looking forward to the future. And a lot of it's already in the present. We see a lot of those first steps in there. So yeah, we're coming up on the hour and a little bit over, and so we should be wrapping up here. There's so many more things on the SDK release notes inside of SDK 54 that we could spend another hour easily. I was going to give everybody like 10 seconds to mention one deeper cut that we didn't talk about. I'll go first. Dev Client is available in experimental in Apple TV. So if you're developing for TV OS, you now can use Expo Dev Client. That's pretty rad. Anybody else?
I think we didn't mention that now Android targets API 36 and the latest Android 16. So that's
right.
Cool
and Edge is default by now. So now you have like a much more consistent experience dealing with
we
the
also have
safe areas.
we also have now the availability to opt into the predictive back gesture, which is really cool on Android as well.
Yeah. Any others from you, Brent?
No, I mean, it's all in the release notes, or at least a lot of it. So yeah, I guess read it over again carefully, because
yes,
like Keith said, there's a lot of stuff there that you'll miss. And I mean, maybe the other thing to highlight here that I think is really relevant, although probably a lot of people on this call, it's not super important because they've done this a while ago, but SDK 54 is the final release to include the legacy architecture, right? So it's funny how that's quickly just become a kind of non-topic, but there's a good section in the release notes about it. We explain like we've been working with some of the biggest companies in the React Native space, and working with them on their migration story alongside folks at Meta, and I think things, and of course, aforementioned, things have been progressing really well. And so I think like if an app like Shopify and their like point of sale app, which like I mentioned in the release notes, serve millions of merchants, if they can move over, I think a lot of smaller apps can definitely do this today. So if you haven't moved over yet, definitely it's a good time to start doing that. And it's never been easier than it is in SDK 54. Not to say you won't run into issues. Check out the release notes to see known remaining issues. But yeah.
If you find something, let us know. Submit an issue to the GitHub. Reach out to us on Discord, etc. We'll definitely want to jump in there because we want the anybody who hasn't made the transition yet, we want it to work well for you, because if you're not making it yet, you'll be making the transition eventually. Cool. So yeah, thanks guys. Thanks Beto and Brent for joining us on the live stream and tell us all about the good stuff in SDK 54. A few last things to drop. We have the Expo Router V6 live stream at this exact same time next week. So all you folks who had Expo Router adjacent questions, we're going to try to get back to more of those next week when we devote a whole hour to Expo Router V6. I wanted to drop real quick, speaking of the SDK 54 release notes, if you scroll all the way to the bottom, you will see an increasingly, with each SDK release, impressive list of contributors to the SDK. Lots of contributions from the React Native community on every release. I have to compile that list semi-manually. I keep writing scripts to make it a little bit easier for me because it's such a large list that it's hard to keep track of. And I even missed a couple on the first pass. Thank goodness you all reached out and let us get you in there. So thank you so much to our contributors and our beta testers as well. So we highlight those folks at the bottom of the release notes. And then finally, Expo Go is now on the MetaQuest Horizon store. So if you have a MetaQuest, go check it out on the Horizon store. Start to play around with Expo on your MetaQuest.
Yeah, and let us know if you want a video about it, by the way. I have one here, so you can see it.
I know it's ready. Oh, look, it's peering up there. I love how it's got, it like looks like a little, like almost like what's the spiders with a bunch of eyes, like head sitting up there above the Expo logo on your shelf, like a little bit like ready to pounce.
Yes, I've been trying it. It's really cool.
Awesome. All right. Thanks everyone for joining us, and happy upgrading to SDK 54, and we'll see y'all next week.
Bye.